I don't think our culture's lost this commitment to marriage, but there's an increasing number of people, the way you describe it, saying, you know what, I'm content being single or content being single longer than generations in the past.
In the promotional materials for your book, there's a really powerful paragraph here. It says, "The love that the world tells us to pursue is all about self." And this is so important because this is such a big message in culture right now. It's something that is dominating the Amazon bestseller lists and the New York Times bestseller list, this idea of happiness being the ultimate goal and pursuing just that self and that sense of self and follow your heart, live out your dreams. And you're asking the question, but what is the Christian worldview on love? Because when we follow Jesus, we realize that he invites us to reorient the focus of our lives. And so tell us a little bit about this title, Chasing Love, because I think there's something there that's answering just this other message that seems to be in our faces all the time coming from popular culture.
What's interesting about the title is actually the publisher came up with the title and they said, here's what we want to call the next wave of True Love Waits. So Lifeway is doing the curriculum and Brodman Holman is doing the book. So they gave me the title, and the more I thought about it, I think when we hear chasing love, we think, how do we chase after and find love? So the assumption is all of us are chasing after it. How do we do this well? And as I thought about and I prayed about it, I thought, you know what? Rather than chasing love for myself to feel good and authenticate myself, actually the Christian worldview says chase love seeking God and seeking others first. And then all these things will be added unto you. So I kind of tried to flip the narrative on its head and said, look, if you're chasing after this for yourself, you're going to end up empty when it's all said and done. You're going to never have a meaningful, lasting relationship and marriage. But if you ask first, what does it mean to love God? And what does it mean to love other people, whether married or single? That's going to transform how we even approach this conversation. So really, I'm hooking young people because they're thinking, yeah, I'm kind of looking for love. So give me some tips how to find the right person or be the right person. Then I open up very quickly and go, no, actually, if you're in this for yourself, you're going to end up being empty. You got to find out, what is your life, your bigger life about? So I'm kind of framing it for students saying the question of how you approach marriage and love and sex is a smaller subpoint of how you approach your entire life. So if your life is about loving God and loving other people, then your marriage, if you get married, or your singleness will reflect that. So let's ask the question first, what does it mean to love God and love other people before we look inward?
That's good. And you mentioned singleness because I think this is such a big topic right now. Lots of older, well, when I say older, I mean not like super young, teenage, young adult women are choosing to not marry. I mean, girls, it used to be girls would grow up and you dream of getting married. And now it seems like that's just not happening all the time. People aren't really thinking about getting married. I think you would probably know this better than I would about statistics, but is marriage kind of, not as many people are getting married? Is that fair to say, or?
Yes. So I still think most people in America aspire to get married someday.
Okay.
Most would say they want to get married, but people are getting married later and then they're having kids later, or they're not having kids. So as a whole, I don't think our culture's lost this commitment to marriage, but there's an increasing number of people, the way you describe it, saying, you know what, I'm content being single or content being single longer than generations in the past. So I think that's the important piece is if you look back at certain what are called sexual purity campaigns in the past, one of the things that almost nobody ever talked about was singleness. The assumption was, and prepping for this book, I read, hundreds of articles, studies. I got dozens of books by Christians, non-Christians, kind of critiquing this purity movement. And one of the things I found is there was little, if no, discussion about singleness. Well, number one, that's not biblical. If you read 1 Corinthians 7 and you read Matthew 19, both singleness and marriage are equal, beautiful ways of honoring and serving the Lord. And Paul says in 1 Corinthians 7, marriage has its benefits, but it has its challenges. Singleness has its benefits. It has its challenges. In fact, Paul's kind of like, I wish more of you, if not all of you, were single. And there's a little hyperbole there, but we've missed that. Part of purity movements in the past was if you just do certain things right now, then God will reward you with that spouse. And people might not have used these words, but they basically meant if you keep yourself sexually faithful now, then God will bring this partner and you will have endless sexual bliss for the rest of your life. And then what happened? Then people didn't find that spouse, and then they look back and question their faith, or they find their spouse and marriage and sex was harder than they thought it might be. So I'm taking a step back, just looking at scripture saying, wait a minute, singleness is good and it's beautiful and it's biblical. How do we hold up singleness and marriage as ways of honoring the Lord? And one little way I did this to flip the narrative is in the book, the first third is all about like the backdrop for how we approach sexuality from a biblical standpoint. The middle third is where I look at sex, singleness, and marriage. Now, I first talk about defining what is the purpose of sex, and then I talk about singleness, and then I talk about marriage. Why? Because all the kids reading this are single right now, and they'll be married someday. And second, it was a way of flipping the script, because usually it was, well, sex and marriage, and people didn't even talk about singleness. So I put singleness first to kind of highlight that and dispel some of the myths. And I'll tell you, Lisa, I've had probably 3 or 4 singles read it just to give me feedback in the manuscript. And one lady was in tears. She's like, why do more people not talk about this? And she was single. I was like, this is beautiful. And we've got to get this message to the church. So I'm married, you're married. It's easy for us to not talk about this.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of single people wondering, where do we fit within the church? And casting a vision for that starts when our kids are younger.
Well, that's a very interesting point, because I got married at 28, which back then was like very late. Now that's like it would be considered young now. But I remember as a single person feeling that way, like I didn't have a place to fit in, and I felt like I didn't thrive very well because I was single. And I wonder if, I would have had a better foundation of understanding that if I could have embraced it a little more and found the joy of that.